Good morning, everyone. Thank you for sharing your Wednesday morning with us. My name is Deja Johnson. I am with the Ohio Apex Accelerator, and we have a treat for you this morning. This is our next iteration of the Summer Innovation Series. As you know, this is uh, a weekly webinar series that we've been putting on this summer, the Ohio Apex Accelerator, as well as the Ohio Small Business Development Center. Each of these webinars have been recorded and posted on the Apex Accelerator YouTube channel. Please check out the videos if you have missed things from prior weeks. Great opportunities to learn from the NASA Glenn Research Center, who you'll hear from today, as well as experts in the Air Force Research Labs, Defense Homeland Innovation Hub, as well as several experts on SBIR, STTR, and people in the innovation landscape. This would be the second to last webinar that we have. Again, today we're going to be talking about NASA Glenn Research Center. We'll also next week have our in-person event, the Small Business Resource Panel, where you can hear from leaders from the Ohio Third Frontier, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, as well as statewide leadership for the Small Business Development Center. I will also be there representing the Ohio Apex Accelerator. Great opportunity to network with small businesses across the state, as well as to interface with small business leadership programs right here in the heart of it all. With that, I also want to kick off an introduction to our speaker today. We have Dr. Renee Eveland. She works with the NASA Glenn Research Center, and I want to tell you a little bit about her before we get started. Dr. Renee Eveland earned a PhD in chemistry from Northwest University and then spent the next 22 years working for a specialty multi company in Northeast Ohio. Back in 2022, Renee joined NASA Glenn Research Center as a contract employee in their tech transfer office. However, in March of 23, Renee became a civil servant for NASA and expanded her role into the tech transfer office to include providing support for the T2X program, Technology Transfer Expansion Program. To support the Tech Transfer Office, Renee helps to manage the patent portfolio for NASA Glenn Research Center, specifically with a focus on the sensors and materials and coatings portfolio. Renee also evaluates the license applications submitted by small companies, large companies, and startups. More recently, she's been focused on understanding the local entrepreneurial ecosystem in and around the Cleveland area. She's also expanding to kind of broaden her reach into the Illinois entrepreneurial ecosystem as well. Dr. Renee Eveland has a wealth of knowledge, as you can gather from her bio, and all things innovation and all things NASA Glenn. With that, as she is going through her presentation this morning, should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat if that's available, as well as the Q&A function. We'll be able to get to some of those questions throughout the presentation. And of course, if you prefer to save your questions toward the end, I will certainly have some time for Renee and I to engage in some Q&A there as well. With that, Dr. Eveland, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you. All right. That was excellent. All right. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about who NASA is, and then I'll talk a little bit NASA in the broad sense, right? So the national sense. Then NASA Glenn Research Center, which is where I work, and that's located in Cleveland, Ohio. And then I'll talk about ways in which small businesses, entrepreneurs, anyone really can sort of interact with NASA, both outside of the technology transfer office and then inside the technology transfer office. So just so you get a flavor of sort of the different ways in which you can interact with NASA. And then at the end, I'll just have a couple of examples of success stories to discuss. So who is NASA? So when people think about NASA, I think they think first of, astronauts. But right, NASA is more than just astronauts, right? We are engineers, we're chemists, we're finance people, we're human resources people. we're project manager type folks. So really do kind of run the gamut of roles. And so it's like I said, it's more than just astronauts. That's just a small part of the employment here. So so where's NASA? So as I mentioned, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, at Glenn Research Center, and we have 10 sites, sort of, that pretty much are on the coasts, if you want to say the East Coast and the West Coast, as well as the Southern Coast, I suppose. Um, and we here at Glenn Research, each of the centers sort of specializes in particular research areas. Some of these sites are research centers, and some of them are flight centers. So they're doing things the research centers are doing early stage type research, and the flight centers are doing sort of later stage research, and setting up for the astronauts for success, as well as both space and the aero programs. So, so what does NASA do? Right, we certainly provide mature technologies that are developed for space flight. So we do research in both the aeronautics space, but as well as space, right? So aeronautics being the airplanes that are flying around, but space as well. And so these are the mission directorates that we speak about. We speak about space technology and space operations. And then we have aeronautics science, which is more of focused on health and scientific studies. And then finally, exploration systems development. So those are the different kind of focus areas, if you will, or we call them our mission directorates. But we do expand human knowledge through new scientific discoveries, and we do try to catalyze economic growth and drive innovation to address national challenges. So you'll see a little bit of both of those things as I go through the slides this morning. So in Cleveland, the site at NASA Glenn it's actually two different sites. So the first one is the picture on the left, which is sitting in one of the buildings there. It's right next to Cleveland Hopkins Airport. And if you're flying into the Hopkins Airport, you can often see our hangar, which the roof is painted with the letters NASA. So it's relatively visible depending on which side of the plane you're coming in on. But it's relatively visible as you're coming in. The site's 307 acres, and we have around 3,000 employees. That's gone down recently, so those numbers might be a bit out of date. And then we've got our Neil Armstrong Test Facility, and that's in Sandusky, Ohio. So that's basically west of Cleveland, and it's a much larger site. But there are fewer people on that site, so it's quite a large campus, but there's a lot fewer people there. And we do, as is suggested in the name, we run testing there. So I mentioned kind of that each of the centers has different specialties. So these are our core competencies at Glenn. And those include the aircraft propulsion, in-space propulsion and cryogenics, power energy storage and conversion, as well as materials for extreme environments and communications. Those are really the focus areas, if you will, for the research that is done at NASA Glenn. We also have some unique test facilities. So, and folks may or may not be aware, but the test facilities at NASA actually can be utilized by external folks, whether that be a small business or large business. The rule, if you will, about that is that you have to have testing that's really uniquely available at NASA in order for us to be able to conduct testing for a company. But it is possible to do that. So these are some of our unique space facilities. We have the world's largest vacuum chamber. which is actually featured in the first part of the movie, the Avengers movie. So if you've seen that, you might see that vacuum chamber. That view there is familiar. Um, we've got a slope lab, which is really cool. It's like it looks like a big sandbox, frankly, and the sandbox can tilt upward to try and force a rover to experience what it would be like to be in the bottom of a crater and climb out of it. We've got an extreme environment rig, which is actually set up for really to replicate the atmosphere in Venus. There's lots of corrosive. The atmosphere in near Venus is relatively corrosive and high temperature and high pressure, and so that's kind of what that rig is for. And we have test rigs as well for mechanical vibration, and we have a drop tower there as well. And then our aeronautics facilities, right? We have an icing research tunnel, and engine component facilities testing, propulsion system testing. So again, these are things that these are some unique capabilities that Glenn has, and they are certainly available to take advantage of if you are in that sort of business, and the testing is not available outside at a separate lab. Because if it's available commercially somewhere, we don't want to compete with commercial entities who offer that. So briefly interacting with NASA. So if you want to interact with NASA sort of outside the Office of Technology Integration and Partnerships, certainly there are employment opportunities, and I won't go into those any further than to just say intern opportunities are at intern.nasa.gov, and other opportunities are posted at usajobs.gov. And I will talk a little bit about becoming a supplier to NASA and our Office of Small Business Programs, and as well, just briefly, about our solicitations and our challenges. So NASA, each site will have an Office of Small Business Programs, and that's where this office actually aids small businesses in becoming approved suppliers to a NASA facility. And the cool thing is that when you become an approved supplier to a single facility, in response to sort of a solicitation, you are actually approved for all of NASA, so all sites, not just the site that you were essentially applying. We're applying to their solicitation. You are approved for all NASA sites. So that's kind of cool. And then the prizes, challenges, and crowdsourcing program is also another way. And I've actually been doing a detail in this with folks in this area, and it's fascinating. And this is really an opportunity to engage in problem solving. It's really problem solving through crowdsourcing. And there are lots of challenges out there. The team here that handles our collaborative innovation is actually, while it's based in NASA, it actually sponsors challenges not just for NASA, but also for any federal lab that wants to issue a challenge. And all the active challenges can be found at challenge.gov. And so that's kind of a fun place to look through. And if you've got some ideas to submit, those are typically changing fairly often, and so that's how you can find those opportunities. Lots of websites. This I've checked, but not super recently, to see if these are all active. I can send Deja a copy of the slides so that she's be able to distribute them if somebody wants to see what these all of these different links are. And I do know that there's been a push to try to consolidate some of these things. But this is just to say that there's lots of resources out there. And if you're curious and you want to learn some about these resources, they are at a whole variety of websites. Okay, so the good stuff. So inside the Technology Transfer Office, which is where I work, I'll first talk a little bit about idea incubation and then idea commercialization. So Deja mentioned that you have heard about SBIR and STTR, so I will just briefly review what those are. And then we've got our academic research that we sponsor. That program is called STRG. And then we'll go into licensing, and that's what I do here at in the Tech Transfer Office, is help folks who want to license our technologies. So that'll be the meat of that part of it. So SBIR is for Small Business Innovation Research, and it's NASA's way of funding opportunities, supporting small businesses, and there's three different phases. So there's the phase one, which is sort of idea generation. There's phase two, which is prototype development, and phase three. The solicitations come directly from NASA researchers, so they're looking to solve a problem that they specifically have, and so the solicitations usually come out on an annual basis, and more than just so NASA has an SBIR phase. Actually, this is clearly outdated, so. As far as I know, the SBIR release for 2026 has actually been delayed to the summer, to June. Normally it would come out in January and then close in like March. But as far as I know, that's been delayed till June for next year. So phase one, that goes through a solicitation process, and you have to submit your proposal for that. Phase two funding is only available for successful phase one, and phase three similarly is only available for successful phase two, and that's actually not really funding. It's sort of the ability to continue to do the work through utilizing sort of the rules of SBIR, but the funding actually at that point is coming from an external source. SBIR Ignite is actually a little bit newer of a program, hasn't been around quite as long. And this one's specific again to entrepreneurs and small businesses. So, and it helps to fund early stage tech. So the actual goal here is to try and commercialize the tech. So if you haven't heard about the Ignite program, I would definitely encourage you to take a look at that and see. I do believe that the most current Ignite, I think it just closed recently. But again, if you go to the website, you'll be able to find more information about when those are open, when those solicitations open, and what the topics are. So NASA also sponsors research at universities, and I'm not going to go through this whole list, but it's just to show that there are. The program is called the Space Technology Research Grant, or STRG program, and there are opportunities to work with professors and funding that comes directly from NASA to work on space or aerospace type projects. All right, so patenting and patent licensing. So this is the fun part for me. So the patent, by way of a sort of a reminder, is really an exclusive right it's a right to exclude others from doing what it is you want to do. And it's it does have a lifetime. So patents are only in force for 20 years, and that lifetime is from the date that the application is submitted, so not necessarily from the grant date. And so it gives the inventor the rights to exclude others from doing what's described in the patent. And not every company that licenses patents, or not every company that obtains patents, obtains them to license. Some don't, right? Some private companies, the private company that I worked for 22 years, they patented to protect their technology, and they didn't patent to license. So it's the reason for patenting is different from the perspective of, are you a government entity? Are you a private company? But most private companies not all, but most private companies are not out to license their technologies. They're out to sort of protect their space, and they're not in the business of licensing. However, the government, including NASA, we are our specific goal is to license our patents. And so when we grant a license, that's basically a contract between the government and the entity that allows that entity to make and use the patent. So, or make and use the invention described in the patent, I should say. Um, the I had a great thought and I lost it, but I'm sure it'll come back to me there. Sorry about that. So as a technology manager, what I do is actually look internally to determine which things we want to patent, but also then interview companies that are interested in licensing our patented technologies and determine the best path forward for that company in terms of licensing the technology. And technology transfer has actually been around for quite a while. It really dates back to the 1980s. And it is a congressionally mandated service, if you will. And so and all federal labs are congressionally mandated to license their technologies to the public in order to try to provide essentially a bit of a return on investment to the U.S. taxpayers. So overall, NASA has probably a close to 1,500 patents. That's agency-wide, so that's all the centers that you saw earlier. And you can see they're just broken down here in terms of the types of end uses, if you will, or categories. And you can see that by far the largest chunk here is for materials and coatings, and that's because, right, to go into space, you're typically talking about either extreme cold environments or extreme hot environments, and so you really need to develop new materials in order to withstand those harsh environments. But this is kind of how the patent portfolio is broken up. And to find our patents, you would go to technology.nasa.gov and click on the patents button, and you'll see those same categories that you just saw in that pie chart. You'll see them all listed here. So you can browse a category and click on a category. You can filter if you want on a technology by a certain NASA location. And when you first click on the category, what you'll see actually is what shows up in the bottom lower corner, bottom lower right corner, where you can see there'll be a picture, if you will, for each of the patents and a small description, along with a button to read more. And so if you click the button to read more, what you'll see is a top sheet or technology opportunity sheet. And it's a 2-page sheet that actually will describe what the invention is, and what the benefits of the invention are, and what are some potential applications that we thought might be applicable for that technology. And they all have this same format. They're all the technology description sheets are all 2 pages. They all have a description of what the technology is, why it was developed, as well as the benefits and potential applications. Also note that on that website, when you are viewing a TOPS page, there will be 2 buttons. One that's in blue and it says ask a question, and one that says it's in red that says apply to license. So if you are interested in licensing a technology, it's very simple and easy to do. If you select the apply to license button, then we will be notified. Actually, you'll see an electronic form that will come to you then to fill in, and then we'll be notified that you have submitted a license application. And so that's really all it takes to make a license application, and that'll be reviewed by the NASA center where the technology originated. So the license to use actually is from one legal entity to another. So if you have a small business that already has, if you've been If you're an entrepreneur and you don't have a small business yet, or you're not incorporated, you would want to form a limited liability company so that you can engage in a license, because it's from one legal entity to another. So it'll be from the legal entity, the site at NASA where the technology originated, and then your company. So once you fill in the online form, there is I'll just kind of make note that there is a submit button at the bottom. And because I think folks sometimes will go on there and they complete information and they think that just because they've completed it, it's all ready to go, which it is, but you have to hit submit or else we're not typically viewing it. It's sort of it's there for, you can go back to it, so you can save your progress if you want and then go back to it, but it's not actually submitted until you hit the submit button. So then the application would be reviewed and you would be contacted by someone from the technology transfer office, and that the technology transfer folks will make a recommendation, and an agreement can then be reached. So NASA, the center management has to sign the agreement. So to get an agreement through the center management, it usually does take, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks ish. Just because there's some paperwork that has to go on, frankly, from NASA side, and then it has to kind of be approved up the chain. And getting a license, we're not trying to make it super difficult. We want to make this easy for folks who are interested in licensing our technologies. We aren't really discriminating based on the quality, if you will, of your application. We want to understand, do you have some experience in this space? Because a lot of times especially at NASA Glenn, since we're a research center, a lot of times the inventions that you'll find they're not market ready. So they need some research and development before they can go to market. And so you really kind of need either to be that technical person yourself or to have a team of folks or some technical person that you can rely on if you're not technical, to sort of help mature a technology to be ready for commercialization. So typically we'll start folks, we have a couple different types of licenses, and typically we'll start folks on what we call an evaluation license. So that allows you to test drive the technology and determine, is the technology going to work for the application that I would like to commercialize it for. And that's relatively simple to obtain that evaluation license. It's typically a $2,500 fee. Each center sort of handles these licenses in a slightly different way, but at Glenn we have a $2,500 fee that's due annually, and we typically will allow folks, it's usually a 12-month license, but we allow an extension for 3 years basically. And if things don't work out and you want to cancel that license, it's very easy to do. It's a simple matter of notifying NASA of your intentions, and the agreement can be basically rescinded. So again, we're not trying to make it super difficult. If you find out that the technology will work for the commercialized, in a commercial way, and you want to actually manufacture and sell, we would convert from an evaluation license to a commercial license. So the evaluation license just lets you make it or have it made, or conduct testing, but it does not let you sell, manufacture, or sell. And that's what the commercial license is for. So the commercial license allows you to manufacture and sell. And the terms of the commercial license are negotiated on a per license basis, because sometimes, right, the technology that you might be commercializing, it could be that you are making something, at high volume, but maybe low cost, or a lower volume but a higher cost. So we actually negotiate the terms of each of those licenses as they situations arise. There's usually a minimum royalty fee and a running royalty rate in those commercial licenses, but again, the terms of those agreements are negotiate. We can negotiate those. And really, the last one here is a government use license. So if you are a company who has won a contract, an SBIR contract, or any other type of contract, frankly, with any government agency, then we would issue what's called a government use license. And that's free because we're not, one government entity is not charging another government entity to use the technology. So that's free. And the term of that license is for the same amount that the contract is active for. So if you have an SBIR and that term is 9 months, then the term of the contract is for that 9-month time frame. So we also, besides having patents for licensing, we have software that's also available. And software is actually free as long as you register on the site. The software is actually arranged in a very similar way to our patents in that they're categorized. And so if you would like to sort of search, you can pick a category and search on that category. And if there's something that you find interesting or that might help your business, then you can basically register and to be granted a copy of the software. A third way, another way that we kind of interact sort of is through what we call a Space Act agreement. And a Space Act agreement, so our office handles these as well. And a Space Act agreement is really if an external company sort of wants to utilize NASA's services, that could be because they would like a prototype material, or really if you're looking to utilize the time, if you will, of an expertise of some of our employees, then it would be completed through one of these Space Act agreements. So the key thing here is having a statement of work that both the NASA folks and the external folks agree on. That's kind of how those are coordinated. So sometimes the Space Act agreement goes hand in hand with a license, and sometimes it does not. So we've also got a technology transfer entrepreneurial engagement program. So we were, as mentioned in the introduction, we were called T2X before, and now we've kind of morphed, if you will, to being an entrepreneurial engagement program. Really, the name has changed, but the things that we do hasn't changed. So what we try to do is talk about NASA as a resource and make sure that companies are aware that we do have technologies available for licensing, that we do sponsor research through our SBIR and STRG portfolios. We as well will work through this program with universities so that they are also aware that we have technology for licensing, and also they can have an opportunity to utilize our patent portfolio to help teach about entrepreneurial startup, those types of topics. And so they can use a real real patent as opposed to sort of making something up or having to come up with their own idea. They can utilize real technologies as they're teaching about lean startup or entrepreneurial consumer, how important it is to speak with your consumers and ask questions and have a product market fit. And so that's kind of a sort of a secondary function, if you will, but is very much in line with our goals in the technology transfer office. And so I kind of already mentioned this with the Technology Transfer University, and we're specifically in this engagement program kind of focused on entrepreneurs and sort of helping them understand what the resources are that are available to them. So we do actually work closely with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And so, we try to let people know that there's a pro bono program, for example, if you are looking for assistance in filing a patent application, and we can help kind of guide people to those resources. And certainly the other resources, being the small business associations and economic development corporations and all these types of accelerators, innovators. And so we try to kind of keep an eye on what's available in the ecosystem so that when we're speaking with entrepreneurs, we can make them aware of all the resources that are out there that could help them. So in terms of product offerings and services, really we've got research, development, and testing services. We've got facilities that can be made available. We've got intellectual property that can be licensed. And as well, we've got some subject matter experts that can be utilized potentially through Space Act agreements. So these are some of the success stories here. These are just a few examples. We actually have a website that's called Spinoffs, and there are lots and lots of stories at the Spinoff website. Some of them are SBIR type successes where a company was funded with SBIR funds and went on to further commercialize, maybe for space purposes, maybe not for space purposes. But there's lots and lots of success stories that kind of show that are good examples of how success can be found, right? So it's certainly challenging to start your own business or be a small business owner, but we kind of want to show people that it is possible to succeed in either a licensing situation or even with SBIR type funds. So memory foam is a good example of a technology that started off in NASA's labs. Memory foam is actually invented in NASA in the 1960s. Because they were looking for a material that could absorb the shock, if you will, of when the capsule actually comes down in the ocean. And that's why it was originally developed. But since then, it's been utilized in motorcycle seats, and it was utilized, I think, in airline seats. More recently, in mattresses and pillows, right? So you may have either a mattress or a pillow that's got memory foam in it. So that technology is a great example of something that started off with a purpose for NASA, but ended up with a commercially viable purpose as well, and has been utilized in products that you might see in your everyday life. The other example I like to highlight actually is the invisible braces. So a lot of folks don't know that the polymer used in invisible braces started off in NASA labs actually as a coating for an antenna of all things. But somebody, saw that polymer and its properties. So it was transparent, and it could be molded, and it would hold its shape after that mold. And right, that whoever saw that, was probably a dentist or an orthodontist and said, what is it that's stopping folks from getting braces? Well, people don't like the way they look. And so here's kind of a problem that potentially we could solve by creating invisible braces. And that's what they did. So I like to try to tell people that just because you are, you may not be like super geeky scientist, you can still, potentially, use your creativity to convert a product that you see into something that's terrestrial, that has a terrestrial purpose and use in a potentially a successful business. The technology that allows all of us to have a camera in our cell phone was also also started off in a NASA lab. So, I think pretty much everybody who carries a cell phone has a camera on their phone these days, and that's because of the technology that was advanced. Um, from originated in a NASA lab, but again was advanced for commercial terrestrial purposes, and now it's in your phone. So lots of great examples to be found in the Spin-offs magazine that hopefully can serve as inspiration. If you have questions, this is my contact information. I'm at renee.a.eveland@nasa.gov. And if you have other questions that you want to ask now, that is my last slide.
Thank you again, Dr. Ewan. I think that was really cool. I had no idea that invisible braces were a NASA project. Go figure, though. That was really
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, it's I think folks like sometimes are just like, oh, NASA, what? I don't have a whole lot to say to NASA, and I'm like, no, you have to listen to our message. You you could invent whatever the next best thing that everybody's carrying around
uh,
or wearing in their teeth.
who would have known? Well, again, if you guys do have questions for Dr. Evelyn, you can utilize that Q&A function or the chat to throw your questions in. And while they're working on that, I do have a question for you. Of course, it sounds like there's a space for everyone and everything in terms of innovation and NASA Glenn. Are there specific focus areas in the near future that NASA is kind of looking to advance more specifically?
Um, I mean, we're definitely really focused now on, I mean, we've been focused on Moon to Mars, really, and getting back to the moon and developing. Um, there's a lot that needs to go into developing, the technology there. So it's technology, it's energy savings and energy storage, and how would we do that on the moon or Mars? Um, and so there's I don't know that I would say that there's, I'd say the focus areas are the same ones that I mentioned, right? We're still talking about communications quite a bit. Quantum technology, quantum communications is kind of a big deal right now. I think folks used to think that was far off, but I think right now it's actually getting to be maybe like a whole lot closer. Like instead of 10 or 15 years out there, it's more like I think more like 5 years out there. And so there are technologies that I think are more popular. It's interesting because licensing these technologies sometimes can really be a challenge because sometimes people don't really even know that they need it or want it for a couple of years because NASA is really looking at things so far in advance. We have some folks here who licensed a technology from NASA Glenn. They licensed a solid oxide fuel cell technology. They don't anticipate being commercial until after the patents have expired, which is actually a couple of years from now. So, and that's okay. It's again, sometimes some of these things are very technical and will create and take a bit of time to develop into a commercial product. Some of them are further along than others. So not everything is super early stage. Some things are further along, and maybe the end use is more apparent. But we certainly love it when somebody's super creative and um, is looking at our materials or any of our inventions and sort of reimagining how they could be used. So, um, yeah. Can I
Cool.
answer any other questions?
I don't see anything popping up into the chat. One that
Okay.
might close us out here. You mentioned you work very closely, well, your role specifically in licensing and or patents and patent licensing. Are there common challenges that you've seen that small businesses have to overcome in that regard, specifically, and again, trying to ascertain a patent or patent license with NASA?
Yeah, so I mean, if a small business, you know, if a small business is trying to obtain their own patent, I would say the difficulty there is really the expense. It can be certainly an expensive endeavor uh, to prepare the patent application itself and to submit it. There are the U.S. the Patent Office, Patent and Trademark Office has resources that can help. Um, and So that can be useful to know. In terms of things that are, things uh, that are challenges for small businesses that license the technology, I would say, right, it's really, to be honest, it's really time and money because I think a lot of folks maybe don't realize that you really do need, um, a lot of times to commercialize something, you need millions of dollars in several years, to be quite honest. So the companies that are succeeding, like I was mentioning, the solid oxide fuel cell company, they've actually gotten some funding from. They're a subcontractor basically for a government project. So um, that is really what has carried them, I think, to the point where they are now. And the point where they are now is actually they have their own. They have a new site, if you will, a new manufacturing and office site nearby here, and they've hired. I want to say they've got around 20 employees now. So it does take, it is hard work. It isn't easy, but it is possible. And so, if you've got a great idea, we definitely encourage you to take a look at the portfolio and fill out an application. Like I said, I don't know if, I think maybe some folks think, oh, it's super difficult to get a license. And again, we try to make getting an evaluation license fairly straightforward and simple of a process. And the best thing that you can do is really kind of understand what's available when you do get the license, because some folks in their application will say, well, we want to co-develop something with NASA. And that's not really what the tech transfer office does. So we don't, the researchers' time is focused on their missions. And it's not to commercialize the things that they're sort of inventing. It's to solve the problems that they're working on. So it's typically, unless there's a reason that where NASA's the work that the company's doing and NASA's goals are overlapping. In that case, you would potentially have a Space Act agreement. But I think people will say things in their applications like, "We'd like to work with NASA to commercialize." And my first comment to that is, well, unfortunately, you're not going to work with NASA to develop something. Potentially, if you have an SBIR or SBIR Ignite, you might be. But from a licensing standpoint, it's really up to the folks who are licensing to kind of get that technology matured and commercialized. So understanding what what you'll be getting if you do license a technology is important, just from a let's be real kind of a standpoint. But yeah, like I said, it's not the easiest thing, but time. Give it a couple of years. You'll definitely need some investment, but it does happen, and folks are successful. So, all
Awesome.
right.
Thank you very much for that. And I know you mentioned that you worked pretty closely with the USPTO, the Patent and
Mhm.
Trade Office.
Yep.
The Apex Accelerator will be working closely with them in the fall as
Okay.
well. Lots of learning opportunities, I think, for the audience here. And also, again, for the audience, you have Dr. Renee Eveland's contact information here on the screen. I thank you all for joining us this morning to hear her presentation on NASA Glenn Research Center and all of the ways that it could help you and your small business innovation efforts. Should you have any additional questions, I would encourage you to reach out to her or your local Ohio Apex Accelerator, Small Business Development Center counselor. And even still, I look forward to meeting you all next week in person in our Small Business Resource Panel. With that, I'll give you all a few minutes back into the rest of your day, and I hope you enjoy your Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.